So you want to get lean. It's summertime, you know. Everyone's getting lean, trying to get shredded. Maybe you're trying to do a bodybuilding show, or you're trying to go down weight class for powerlifting, or you just want to look good and feel healthier, you know. Whatever reason may be, you want to get lean. And there's one thing holding you back. You're afraid you're going to lose your gains. You're afraid you're going to lose muscle and lose strength that you've worked so hard to build. And it's holding you back. You don't want to go on a cut for that reason, because you fear that you're going to lose what you've built, waste all this hard work you put into it. And to be completely honest, guys, that is a totally valid reason. I myself I used to be afraid of that when I would go on cuts. I've been training for about 7 years now, and I've competed in powerlifting. I did my first bodybuilding show about 3 months ago, where I was on a really long cut for that, about 6.5 months long. And before that, I used to be afraid of losing gains when I would cut. I'd be afraid of losing muscle and losing strength that I've put so much time into building. And I especially used to be afraid of this when I was powerlifting a few years ago. See, when I first started training, my idea was that I was going to bulk really hard for my first couple years and get really strong. And I would do this huge cut, and I would have my dream physique and like be super strong, just have everything I wanted. But after doing my first cut, I realized that wasn't going to happen. I realized it was going to take years to get where I wanted to be, you know, especially as a natural. It would take me years to be where I wanted to be. And that with that, I'd be doing multiple cutting cycles, you know, multiple cycles where I bulk up, gain a little bit of body fat, then have to cut down and lose the body fat. And, you know, and it can seem kind of like intimidating to go on a cut for that reason. But I think the good news, though, is that a lot of the strength and muscle loss you hear about when cutting is largely a myth, or it's really, really blown out of proportion. And the simple reason why is because most people don't know how to train properly. In my past cuts I'm doing my 6th cut right now, actually. I'm doing a mini cut for the summer. I've done 5 successful long cuts. With each cut I did, I managed to lose a really significant amount of body fat to where I looked a lot leaner at the end. And with every single cut I've done, I managed to get leaner than the previous cut and also lose less muscle and strength on that cut. And I really learned through my years of cutting, through my years of training, especially my last one, that really it is not impossible to keep your gains when you're cutting. And in fact, I would argue that it's possible to gain strength and maybe even some muscle when you're cutting in some instances. And I think what's funny is that with my last cut I did, my contest prep for my bodybuilding show, it was by far my hardest cut. I got the leanest I ever did. I got down to about 7 to 8% body fat at the end, absolutely shredded, contest condition. And on that cut, if you compare me to start to finish a prep, I was stronger at the end of my prep than I was at the beginning. I will say, though, that there were my strength did kind of peak around a month away from my show, and then at that point I was just fighting to maintain what I had, or I lost a little bit on some of my lifts. But there are some lifts I had where I kept I progressed all the way throughout my prep, and I literally remember hitting some PRs at the end of my contest prep, like a week out from my show, which is absolutely crazy. There are some lifts, like my dumbbell bilateral rows and my squats, where I was able to hit PRs up to a week or two out of my show. So I managed to get stronger on this cut and basically get shredded to the bone while staying natural. And I really learned on my prep that this really is possible to do. I would argue to make gains on a cut, or at very least maintain what you have. And as a matter of fact, I hit my heaviest deadlift ever, 475 pounds, while I weighed 147 pounds at the end of a cut. When I was depleted, non-optimal conditioning. Honestly, looking back at this video, I might have had more in me. I might have been able to go for 5 plates. I mean, I remember I didn't go for it because I was afraid of getting injured. But yeah, so I was lifting 3.25 times my body weight. And this is actually an advantage to cutting down. Your relative strength goes up a lot if you can maintain your strength while you cut, and that's how it should be, you know? I'm going to be giving you guys all my tips I have related to nutrition, training, recovery, supplementation, and mindset, because you know, I'm sick of this bullshit that's being spread around the internet that, oh, if you cut, you're gonna lose all your gains, and that's just not true, to be honest, guys. And that was the reason why I was fat. I was like pretty much fat my first couple years of training because I was too afraid to cut down. But I really learned that that information is not true. I'm gonna tell you guys the real stuff. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is having realistic expectations. So like I just said, it is possible to gain muscle and strength on a cut, or at least maintain under certain circumstances. The first circumstance is that you are not like super elite. If you're like a world level powerlifter, or you have a crazy amount of muscle, you've been training like 15-20 years properly, it is going to be much harder to do this on a cut. And you're probably hoping to honestly maintain what you have on a cut. And at that point, that's good progress. That if you can maintain what you have while cutting down, that's good progress. But even myself, like I previously mentioned, I was like deadlifting elite levels of weight, and I still managed to make gains on my last cut. So if you're extremely elite, you're an exception to this. Another exception to this is if you're cutting down to single-digit body fat. Keep in mind, guys, cutting down to a lean body fat percentage where you have abs, you have definition, you look good, you look ripped, like at maybe like 10 to 15% body fat. It's a lot different than getting down to hardcore single-digit body fat, like contest condition, striations in your glutes, striations in your quads, veins in your abs, just like striations, all these cuts everywhere, like shredded, you know. It's a lot different because at that level, your body's basically starving to death and it's looking to burn anything for fuel. So it's going to be much harder to cut down to that body fat and maintain what you have or gain. But I still managed to do it. And I think it's largely because of the tips I'm going to share with you guys. So that's another expectation to have. With my contest prep, like I kind of mentioned before, I got stronger throughout the majority of my prep up until around the last like 6 weeks or so. Then some of my lifts started going down, and in the progress I kind of slowed to where I was like maintaining what I did have. But I was able to fight it pretty well and really honestly come out stronger at the end of my prep. So I will say that like cutting down to single-digit body fat is something that will make this much harder. Another thing I want to talk about too is expectations that even though you can maintain what you have and get stronger on a cut, it's going to be hard to hit really crazy PRs. So you need to be smart with your training, right? You don't want to go and expecting like, oh, I'm going to lose 20 pounds in these next 6 months. I'm going to increase my total by like 200 pounds. Like that's probably not going to happen unless you're overweight, like really overweight or high in body fat. That's probably not going to happen. Another thing too is that there are some lifts that it is going to be harder to maintain your strength or to progress on when you're cutting. Usually the lifts that are the first to go down on a cut or that are the hardest to maintain are presses, especially bench presses, like flat presses, because that's largely dependent on leverage and cushioning. I know for me, that was like the hardest one when I used to barbell bench. That was the hardest one for me to maintain. And on my last prep, you know, that was the one where my progress shot up a lot. I think I was doing like the 70s for, I did 75s for 8 reps at the beginning of my prep. And then I got to the point like midway through, I was in the 80s for 10. So I made some really good progress. Then the last like few weeks, my progress just kind of dipped. But I was able to hit the 75s for 9 like a week out from my show. So I still managed to progress. It was just much lower. All my other lifts though, I kind of was able to actually keep progressing throughout my prep or maintain, like especially back lifts. Usually when you're cutting, your back strength and your leg strength, surprisingly, contrary to what you might think, it's actually easier to maintain. So that's another thing I want to talk about. There are some lifts where it is going to be hard to maintain, but no matter what, guys, you just gotta do what you can. I'm gonna get into it right here. So I think the first thing you need to realize when it comes to maintaining muscle and strength when you're cutting, you have to look at why muscle is on your frame or why your body makes neurological adaptations so you can get stronger. Really, it is because you're providing your body a stimulus through weight or training. You're basically giving a reason for your muscles to grow and get stronger. So you have to realize, like, if you're trying to cut down, if you want to keep the muscle on your frame and keep that strength, you need to keep that reason there. So what does that mean? You got to take your training seriously. You got to keep lifting hard and heavy. You got to train with a purpose. You know, you can't just think, oh, I'm cutting. I'm not gonna lift as much anymore. I'm just gonna do cardio. That's a recipe for disaster. And with that being said, too, you need to really prioritize your training sessions. You need to take your training more seriously. You need to realize that you need to do what you can to make sure your training sessions are as good as they can get. on your cut. When you're bulking, I think it's important to take training seriously all the time. But when you're bulking, if you have a bad workout here and there, or like you don't have to you miss a workout, it's not gonna make as much of a difference because you're not really at a risk of losing muscle. You're just not gonna make as good of progress. But if you're cutting and you do that, that can result in lost progress. If like you skip workouts or you half-ass your workouts, you're not like doing what you should do. That's gonna make a difference, and you're gonna notice it as the weeks go on. So with that being said, you need to take your training even more seriously now that you're dieting and there's a risk of muscle loss. You need to take your training more seriously. As a matter of fact, I usually push harder when I'm cutting, when I'm training, because I'm thinking like, shit, I don't want to lose my gains. I gotta push harder. So that can really honestly drive a lot of progress. So with that being said, I'm actually going to give you guys my nutritional tips. Okay, so when it comes to nutrition, as I've talked about, the most important thing is calories in, calories out. That's what determines if you're going to lose or gain weight. And if you're trying to cut, you're trying to lose weight, right? But if you want to maintain your gains, you don't want to go too fast. You don't want to lose weight too fast. You don't want to crash diet, basically. That's another reason why wrestlers and people who do like insane, dumbass cuts, I'm calling them out on their shit because I'm honestly just calling it out because it's stupid the way they cut. Where you basically starve yourself. That's how you lose muscle. That's how you get weak and like get all emaciated. I hear wrestlers say, my wrestling season sucked because I didn't get to eat at all. I didn't get to eat all during that season. I was just having salad and a protein bar a day. And I'm thinking, like, I almost just dropped an F-bomb. Wow. You are a freaking moron for doing that. What they should do instead is do a gradual cut in their off season and maintain close to that weight. And then during wrestling season, they do water cuts during the week. They don't need to starve themselves. They can actually eat a normal amount of food. I can go down that rabbit hole, but you don't want to cut like people do. You want to actually cut properly. You need to prioritize your nutrition. So you don't want to go too fast. So you might be wondering, how fast should I lose weight? About 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week is a good target to aim for. And usually this is going to amount to around 1 to 2 pounds. Obviously, it depends on how much you weigh. And what this usually is going to mean is usually this is going to amount to around a 500 to 800 daily calorie deficit on average if you average all your days out during the week. So if you're wondering, like, should I aim more towards the lower end or higher end? It depends on multiple factors. If you're a guy, you can usually go more towards the higher end. Usually men can lose weight a little bit faster without having as many hormone negative side effects. And if you're leaner, you want to go more towards the lower end because your body has less fat to just take from to burn calories. But yeah, so you don't want to go too fast. That's the first thing you really need to talk about nutrition. Now I'm going to talk about macronutrients because that's really the next thing down the nutritional list. So macros, protein, fats, carbohydrates. Protein. You want to have high protein when you're cutting because your body needs even more protein when it's in a calorie scarce state, when calories are more scarce. So how much protein should you have? At minimum, I'd recommend 1 gram per pound of body weight as a minimum. I know everyone, all these studies come out saying you only need 0.8 grams per pound of body weight or whatever. I say, why not just go more towards the high end? It doesn't hurt. If anything, it's going to help you because protein has a higher thermic effect, which means you burn more calories as you consume it. But protein, your body needs more protein when you're cutting. So I'd recommend at least 1 gram. But personally, I'd recommend 1.2 grams or higher, like 1.2, maybe up to 1.5 grams if you're really getting shredded. That was about what I was on during my entire prep, and that worked really great for me. So I'd recommend about 1.2 to 1.5 grams per pound of body weight when it comes to protein, at minimum 1 gram. But that's my protein recommendation. As for fats, you don't want to go too low or too high in fats because you want to have, I'll get into it in a bit, you want to have carbs too. So you don't want to go crazy high in fats where you don't have any room in your calories for carbs. You don't want to go too crazy in fat. But on the flip side, you don't want to go too low. The natural lifter, especially, fat is important for hormone productions. It's a basic nutrient that your body needs for survival. So you don't want to go too low in fat. So what I recommend is going more towards the lower end of the recommended amount of fat. The RDA for fat is around 20 to 35 or 40% of calories, something like that. What I recommend is around 20 to 25% of your calories. I recommend drop it closer to that 20 mark if you can. And lowest I would take it is around 15% daily calories at the end, or at lowest 0.3 grams per pound of body weight. And that's only towards the end of a hardcore cut when you're trying to get shredded to the bone. like I did on my prep. I think the last like few weeks of my prep, I was on around 40 grams of fat, which was very, very low. But at that point, I was 140 pounds. So that was like the minimum I should have been consuming. And that was because I was getting to basically a starving level of body fat. But if you're just getting lean or just losing weight, you don't need to do that. I'd recommend you keep your fat lower, but still a moderate amount. So that's what I recommend for fat. As far as carbohydrates go, all I gotta say is keep them as high as you can afford to. Get your protein target where you want it to be, like I said, around 1.2 grams per pound of body weight, or a bit more in some cases, and your fat around 20% of your calories, and get as many carbs as you can afford to. Because carbs are important if you're an athlete. If you're a bodybuilder, you're training, you need carbs. So I think going keto or cutting out carbs completely is a dumbass idea if you're trying to keep your gains when you're cutting. The only reason you should limit your carbs when you're cutting is if you have to. You're trying to get shredded to the bone again, which is a whole different story. I'm actually gonna make a separate video on how to get shredded because it's a lot more intense. But that's my recommendation as far as carbs go. So another thing I want to talk about too is mealtime, because I think especially when you're cutting, meal timing is very important. So when you're in a calorie deprived state, you want to be supplying your body with protein throughout the day. So I've really noticed, especially like with cutting, some people like to do fasting, and if you like to do fasting, fair enough, but I just want to make it a point known that it is not optimal for keeping muscle when you're cutting. So what I recommend is you keep protein throughout the day around at least 4 times per day. The body can go into muscle protein synthesis mode up to 5 times per day, which basically means your body has 5 opportunities throughout the day to build muscle, and you want to have protein available for that. So I recommend eating around like 4 to 6 meals per day with protein in them. Roughly the even amount of protein. I mean, if it's give or take a bit, it doesn't really matter, but that's what you want to do. Especially post-workout, protein is very important. So that's what I recommend. And the other thing I want to talk about is carb timing, because this can make or break your training performance. And I really realized that. I know my first cut I ever did, I kept most of my gains, but I lost some strength, but I didn't know shit about nutrition back then as far as like meal timing goes. So I didn't really know anything about mealtime back then. Now I do, and that's really what makes a huge difference in having good energy for my training sessions. So the way I look at it is that you're an athlete. If you're cutting down, if you're trying to cut down, you need to prioritize your training sessions and make sure you have fuel for your training sessions. So what does that mean? Basically what that means is you basically want to like leave that pre, intra, and post-workout window alone as far as carbohydrates go, as much as you can. So you want to keep them as high as you can. So what that means is that if you have to pull carbs out of your macros, your calories, what you want to do is you want to take those carbs out from times of the day where you're not training, because you need to realize this training window is what's giving me the reason to have muscle, and I need to keep this training as good as I can, and carbs fuel my training. So I need to keep my carbs before my training as much as I can afford to. So that's what you want to do. You want to kind of like put most of your carbs pre and post workout. I think an example, if I can kind of put it here, is I eat about 5 times a day, and my pre-workout meal is usually like highest in carbs, and my post-workout's a little bit higher, and the other 3 meals are moderate. When I'm cutting or I'm doing a mini cut like I am now, basically my meals look like this. My pre-workout meal is high carbs still, because that's what I need my fuel for training. My post-workout meal is kind of moderate, because moderate carbs. Then my 2 of my meals I don't have any carbs. My last meal I have like some carbs. I go low carb. So that's kind of what you want to do, guys. You want to put the majority of your carbs pre and post workout, especially pre-workout, so you have the energy to train. Another thing too about carbs is you want to utilize refeeds to your advantage. If you don't know what a refeed day is, basically it's like 1 day per week where you have a high carb or high calorie day to have mental benefit, and also those like performance benefits and physiological benefits as well as a refeed. And obviously you could choose to do a cheat meal instead. It's gonna be different depending on where you're on a cut or who's like what you just prefer. I found for me what's best is having high carbs with my high calorie days, so I can get something out of them. Not just I'm like consuming a ton of fat and it's just like all this like calories I'm not going to use for training. I like to go high carbs on my high calorie days. So I know that these carbs can fuel my training session that day and the day after. And that's another thing too. Use your refeeds to your advantage. If you can, try to sandwich your refeeds between like 2 hard workouts. So let's say you have 1 refeed day. Well, you do 1 workout on the day and you do your next one the day after. So basically you have energy for those workouts, especially if they're your hardest workouts. Matter of fact, I think that was why I hit my heaviest deadlift ever a few years ago when I was on my cut, because I always did my refeed day on my chest and on my like push day, and then the day after was my deadlift day, and I was able to keep my bench strength pretty much that cut, and then my deadlift went up the entire time because I was basically running off the previous day's I had glycogen from the previous day. So you want to use refeeds to your advantage and use them to fuel your training. Now, how many refeeds you have will depend on where you are and the person again. My prep, I was able to have 3 refeeds up until I got to like the last 2 months. Then I had to cut down to 1 refeed, and at the end, it was low carbs, and it was horrible. But another topic for another video. The last thing I want to talk about nutrition too is getting your micronutrients in and eating mostly good quality food. So the first thing I've really said is so obviously you want to have fruits and vegetables in your cutting to make sure you're getting enough vitamins in, and make sure you're getting your micronutrients in. But you also want to eat mostly good, healthy, whole foods. You guys know me. I can believe in like flexible dieting where you like eat mostly good and you have like some junk food here and there as long as it fits your goals, and eating mostly good. When you're cutting though, you want to be even a bit more strict on this. You don't need to like eat completely clean all the time. Even on my prep, I had like 1 cheat meal a week, and until like the last like 6 weeks of my prep. So you don't need to eat clean 100% of the time, but you want to really prioritize it. If you can, I would say try to have 90% or more of your calories from good healthy foods. I think especially carbs, if you think about it, like, do you think, like, let's just take a look at your pre-workout meal. Let's say for your pre-workout meal, hey, so it's been like a week and a half since I filmed this video, and I'm editing it right now. I'm actually about to post it. I realized I forgot a major tip with nutrition related to micronutrients. So your micronutrients also includes your electrolytes, such as potassium and sodium. When you're cutting, you want to really make sure you're keeping these high. Keep your potassium high too, so what you should do is consume a good amount of fruits and vegetables like bananas, potatoes. Any fruit or vegetable honestly has a good amount of potassium, but sodium is another thing that people really screw up on. You want to keep your sodium high. In fact, I would say try to increase it even more, because when you are cutting your body, you're losing glycogen storage, and glycogen helps hydrate you, so you want to keep yourself even more hydrated, so you want to increase your sodium. So I use a lot of salt in my meals, use sauces like Frank's Red, great source of sodium. So I recommend keeping your sodium high, especially pre-workout. But that's a major tip I forgot to do. Keep your sodium high. Don't try to cut it out at all. I mean, keep it high, and don't be afraid of salt. You guys know what I think about salt. You can have like candy and bacon as a pre-workout meal versus someone who has oats and banana and protein powder. Who do you think is going to have the better workout? The guy who fuels himself with a bunch of candy and junk food and sugar, or a guy who fuels himself with complex carbs? Obviously the second guy. So that's what you want to do. That's really all for nutrition. Basically, don't cut too hard. Keep your protein as high as you can. Keep your fat lower to moderate, at a lower to moderate amount, and then keep your carbs as high as you can, and use refeed days to your advantage, and eat mostly good, healthy, whole foods. Now let's talk about training. This is where a lot of people really screw up too. So as far as training goes, basically you don't want to change anything too much. You got to look at why muscle is built. Again, it's because it provides a stimulus for it. If you want to keep it, you need to basically keep that same stimulus there. So what that means, you don't want to drastically switch up your training all of a sudden and make it different for your body. You want to keep training really similar to the way you do. You might want to make some small changes here and there, but I'll talk about that in a second. So basically, the first thing I want to say off the bat is don't change it too much. Don't change anything too much. If you want to switch out a few exercises, sure, you can do that, but I wouldn't really change anything too much. All that being said, though, you do want to train conservatively when you start a cut. What that means is start with weights you are 100% sure you can hit, and then as the cut goes on, you can increase that weight. And I think too is aim for higher reps if it's a weight that's too light. So, because you don't want to because when it comes to training and making progress, you need to have a solid foundation. You don't want to try to progress off a weight you can barely hit. You want to do what you know you can do and build up from there. So I will say that is the one thing I will say that is really important. But with that being said, you want to keep training heavy. You don't want to just change up your training all of a sudden. This is another stupid dumbass lie out there. Everyone's I'm cutting, I'm gonna tone. I'm gonna tone, I'm gonna quit lifting heavy because lifting heavy makes me bulky. I'm gonna like do high reps and get toned. That's just straight up moronic right there. But one mistake a lot of people will make though is they'll go from like lifting like in a good rep range, like maybe like 6 to 10 reps. They'll automatically just stop doing that and they'll put all the reps, like they'll do like sets of 20 or more, which is not even that productive. So you don't want to do that. You want to like keep lifting in rep ranges similar to what you were doing. If anything, you actually want to lift heavier, maybe like especially towards the end of the cut. What I kind of did on my last prep was I started out with most of my lifts. I mean, there are some exceptions. I was like lifting in the 12 to 15 range, and then I kind of like tapered that down to about 10 to 12, then eventually 6 to 8. And then like the last week up to my show, the last like week and a half, I did like more towards like, I had around like 12 to 15 reps, 8 to 15 reps, just because, you know, I didn't want to risk injury. At that point too, like I only had a little bit left in my cut. I wasn't like risking muscle loss. I wasn't trying to keep making progress with my program. I was just trying to maintain my muscle at the end of my show, and that was what I did basically. So you don't want to like change things up too much. You don't want to like just lift lighter all of a sudden. If you're trying to cut, you don't want to just quit lifting heavy. You don't want to quit lifting heavy. You want to keep training heavy and hard, especially intensity. This is the thing. You definitely don't want to dial back on intensity. You want to keep the intensity there. Intensity is really what's important for maintaining muscle. Basically training failure and how far you take your sets. When you're cutting, you want to actually increase your intensity a bit because, again, you're at a risk of muscle loss. You want to keep the intensity as high as you can, maybe even lift a little heavier. So that's really the important thing. So you want to keep your intensity high. Now volume. A lot of people say cut volume down when you're cutting. You know, I think that can be a good tip, but it honestly really depends. What I recommend you do is you just cut out your junk volume. Cut out the volume you don't need. Like stupid pump up sets that don't do any good. Cut that out if you can, but I also understand it can be kind of fun, like at the end of arm day, just to pump out as many curls as you can. So your biceps look all pumped, you just get pictures. I understand that. I did that all the time. I usually do that a lot, but you know, I recommend maybe cut out junk volume, but honestly, like I don't think I cut out any volume on my prep up until the last like week or two. Then I did, but I would say, you know, keep your volume as high as you can. Then once you get to a point where you can't really recover, maybe dial back a bit on it, but just really realize like training is like when muscle is built and maintained. So you got to keep your training like hard and serious. You can't like be a wuss and just start lifting super light all of a sudden high reps. You got to keep lifting. You got to keep training heavy and hard. So that's what you got to do. I guess my other tip with like training is kind of related to cardio. Don't start doing super high intensity cardio all the time. If you already run or you already like do like higher intensity cardio and you keep doing it on your cut, it probably won't make much of a difference. I mean, I recommend tapering down on it, but I wouldn't just start trying to like go on runs all the time. If you want to do a little bit here and there, it won't make much of a difference, but don't like make your cardio high intensity. I recommend doing more low to lower intensity cardio. So that way you don't really risk like having impacts on your central nervous system and your recovery. So that's what I got to say about training, guys. Train hard. Don't train like a wuss just because you're cutting. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about recovery. So honestly, when it comes to recovery, nothing's really too much different than when you're bulking or at maintenance. You really like want to just keep doing everything I do, stretch, do tissue work, take days off from the gym, and sleep. I will say the one thing though is that recovery is even more important. Sleep is super important when you're cutting, especially when your energy gets lower as you get leaner. For me, like I start really feeling tired once I get around like 13% body fat. I just start feeling like more drowsy and more tired throughout the day. And like below that is just a living nightmare. But sleep is even more important, guys. I recommend you like sleep again 6 to 9 hours per night. If you can, I'd sleep a bit more than what you are doing right now, maybe an hour or more. But get more sleep, and that's really important, especially when you're cutting, because it's really gonna help you like feel more energized and awake for your training sessions. And it's when muscles like basically best built. So yeah, sleep is not for the weak. Get your sleep. All right. So as far as supplementation goes, you know, I'm natural, so I can't give tips on PEDs. I've already said that a lot, but there are some supplements I do want to talk about when you are cutting because they can help you a lot. The first one I want to talk about is caffeine, especially pre-workout. So when you're cutting, pre-workout can be your best friend, especially if you don't use it a lot when you're on the off season or you have a low tolerance. So what I recommend, guys, you actually you don't take very much pre-workout when you're in the off season, when you don't use a lot of pre-workout when you're in a bulking phase. Try not to use a crazy amount of pre-workout when you're doing that, and save it when you're cutting, because when you're cutting and again, you have lower energy and you like take pre-workout, it can wake you up and just help energize you a lot more. So I would say especially like use like save the times for heavy pre-workouts to be when you're cutting and when you're going for really, really big PRs. Utilize caffeine when you're cutting even throughout the day. I think at the end of my prep, I was like consuming a pot of coffee a day and had like taken a scoop of Total War. So probably like 1,000+ milligrams. Not the best for my health, but you know, it was what I needed to do to get through my day. So yeah, use caffeine to your advantage. Another one I want to talk about too is natural sleep aids, because sleep can be another thing that I've just kind of talked about is really important when you're cutting. It's kind of weird for me. When I'm cutting, I notice for me, like when I'm around, like I actually sleep better when I'm cutting. Up until I get to the point where I'm super lean, my body goes in survival mode. The last 2 weeks of my prep, I had a really hard time sleeping without any sleep aids. I was using doxybine, succinate, and melatonin to help me sleep. So I would say if you have to use sleep aids to get more sleep when you're cutting, then do that. The last one I really talk about is natural testosterone boosters, such as herbs. You know, I recommend them when you're cutting, especially because you want to keep your testosterone as high as you can. So some I do recommend are some herbs and some basic vitamins. So vitamin D3 is great, zinc is good, fenugreek and ashwagandha, KSM-66 are all ones I recommend. But these are basically natural herbs and vitamins and minerals that just basically help with like testosterone production. So I recommend those. And so yeah, I've gone over everything you need to know about nutrition, training, recovery, and supplements as far as keeping your strength when cutting goes. And finally, my final tip is mindset. You got to realize, guys, when you're cutting, you're at a risk of muscle loss. So you need to realize that you can't have half-assed workouts. You need to keep your training hard and heavy, like I previously stated a lot. And like, if anything, train harder, you know? I think for me in my prep, like, not only like I had a really easy time training harder, even like I felt like garbage at the end. I had a really easy time pushing harder. I think not only because like I had a goal in mind that I was like trying to just push harder for, but I think also too because I knew I was in a calorie deficit. I'm like, I don't want to lose my muscles, so I'm gonna train harder. I'm gonna push harder. That's the mindset you gotta have, guys. You gotta just push harder and just train. You know, you gotta take this seriously, and I gotta realize like I'm cutting. It's a temporary goal, right? I'm just gonna get lean. Once I get lean, it's gonna be a lot better. But yeah, have a good mindset, guys. Don't be a wuss. Push hard. But yeah, guys, I'll have to say that, guys. I really hope I taught you guys a lot, because I think there's a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to cutting and dieting and like losing strength. I've learned you definitely can make gains when you're cutting, or at least maintain what you do have. Yeah, guys, I'll have to say that, guys. Share some of this unit cut or apply this information yourself. But again, thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later.